The knockout games will bring with them the possibility of penalties. So should the players be practising them already?
Well, here to discuss that with us is Geir Jordet, a professor at the Norwegian School of Sport and Science, who's been described as the world's leading expert on the psychology of penalties. Welcome,
Geir, we need
Geir.
you. We need you.
Help. Well, you've written a book on the subject. Here it is. It is called Pressure. So can you first of all tell us why you decided to write this book?
Well, it's a topic that I've been studying for now 20 years. I've done all kinds of research on it. I've analyzed thousands of penalties. I've interviewed so many players. I've worked with teams. So, I mean, the question is, why didn't I write it sooner?
Right.
It really was about time.
Yeah, well, this is actually a great quote on the front here. Edwin van der Sar, if I'd known half of what's in this book, my trophy cabinet would be much bigger. Too late for him.
Generous, it was.
Why don't people really... sort of really get into penalties? It's such a crucial part of the game, isn't it? And really, it's only recently that people have started talking about, really practicing them properly and the psychology behind it.
Yeah, no, it's not understood by most people because it's people look at the penalty kicks, obviously, but for me, I mean, honestly, I almost lose interest when the foot hits the ball because everything of importance has already happened. It's about the stress and the pressure and how do you cope with that. That's it.
OK, so based on what you just said there, what does happen to players' brains and bodies when they're under such severe pressure?
Yeah, so a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension and worry. All these negative expectations come in, all these images from the past, images about what happens if I miss. So that's one thing. And then a lot of players, they don't want to be there. So they try to avoid the situation. They don't look at the goalkeeper. They try to rush the shot. They try to get out of there as soon as they can. So all these mechanisms are happening at the same time. And that's, of course, the challenge for most players.
And there's lots of different ways of taking a penalty, aren't there? We see some players, a million steps, like Paul Pogba before they strike the ball. Some players
Jorginho had the hop, skip, jump.
Yes. And some people look at the goalkeeper. Some people blast it. Some Panenka occasionally. Is there a correct way to do it?
Well, there are effective ways, of course, but we see so many different techniques. And I mean, we have some of the best penalty takers in the world, the specialists. They do it in vastly different ways. You have the ones who always look at the goalkeeper, make their decision after they've seen where the goalkeeper goes. And then you have the ones who have decided way in advance where to shoot, and they just practice that specific shot. So there are many different ways.
Right. Looking at the goalkeeper, actually, I mean, that's you've got to be quite confident in striking the ball if you're going to do that. If you're not going to even look at the ball as you're striking it.
It's such a sophisticated technique. I mean, imagine you're approaching the ball, you're lifting the foot to kick the ball, and you still haven't decided where to shoot it. That requires so much.
He's brilliant.
Cole Palmer, for example.
He loves it, doesn't he? But
Tony,
he's so calm.
It's many of them now are doing this.
We do hear all the time that the pressure of taking a penalty just can't be replicated in practice. Is that true, or are there certain ways you can practice?
So it's the wrong question in a way.
Sorry.
Because no worries. Because I mean, you can't replicate 100% what's happening. But the question is, how much can you replicate, and is that effective? And the answer to that is absolutely. If you can replicate a little bit of the situation, basically studies show that if you practice with a little bit of anxiety, that will prepare you for performing under high anxiety. So you definitely should practice.
So how do they do that in training? How can you create anxiety?
I think just simulating the shootout. Just have the walk, have the huddle before you go into the shootout, have referees, have a few people watching, make something on the line, like put a little reward up there, a little punishment. Just those little things will get your pump going a little bit, and that's going to be sufficient.
How about crowd noise in that situation? I remember reading an article saying that Mikel Arteta, before Arsenal went to Anfield, was playing out the Never Walk Alone to try and get the players used to it. Do you think that would work in a penalty shootout simulation?
It can add to it, but that's not the crucial element. The crucial element, if you want to get into the details, is to have some consequence of what's happening. That if you missed, it comes with some type of consequence. Maybe a public shaming at the training ground, or something that will happen after if you miss. That's going to be more effective.
What about the keepers? Have you focused on keepers during a penalty shootout at all?
I've looked at them too, yeah. And I mean, we see now there's so much that goalkeepers are doing. They're trying to get into the heads of the penalty takers, trying to disturb them. trying to scuff up the spot, delay what's happening, talking to them, of course, doing different types of dances on the line. There's so many techniques that goalkeepers are doing now, and that's a part of it.
And just going back to the actual techniques of the penalty taker, I mean, you said there that, there's lots of different ways of doing it, not necessarily a right or a wrong way, but is there a more effective way? So, is it more effective overall? Is your success rate higher if you just look at the goalkeeper, or if you, blast it, or, other ways as well, Panenkas, whatever?
It's, well, statistically, they're pretty similar, but it depends a little bit on the goalkeeper too. So if the goalkeeper tends to go early, then it's more effective to look at the goalkeeper. If the goalkeeper tends to stay late and move late, then it's better to blast it in the corner. Right. So, and the Panenka, I mean, that's just unpredictable always. So, yeah.
Would you not recommend a Panenka? Is it?
I wouldn't recommend it, but if someone do it and they score, I mean, then
if it goes
fantastic.
wrong, then you look a bit silly, don't you?
Exactly.
But if you score it, it looks pretty good.
It takes a little bit extra to do that.
You mentioned him earlier, Ivan Toney. He's just got a fantastic record. He seems to thrive under the pressure. Why do you think some players love the pressure and some hate it?
Well, I think that it's related to, first of all, what we've spoken about, what's your skill level at this? Like, are you a specialist? Tony has done this so many times and he knows what he's doing and he's fantastic at it. Then it's about, do you have the proper techniques? Do you have something that you do to obtain control over yourself and the situation at this moment?
He barely has a run-up. He just takes a couple of steps.
And he does it so well, right? But also he breathes, he takes time, he dictates the situation, he sets up the situation, and he has control over what's happening, and that's a good start.
Do you have any thoughts as to why England have not been very good at penalties over the last few years?
That's a great question, of course. And I mean, coming from Norway, I just wish that I was in English and could have my team in a shootout now and then. We have not been in the tournament for 24 years, so that's real pain. With that said, I mean, the pressure of taking a penalty as you're English, I think is huge.
Two wins out of 9 shootouts in European Championships and World Cups. It's not a great win percentage.
And this, of course, just reinforces itself, right? Once you start to get a history of pain, as you have, then it becomes a little bit harder next time.
Yeah, as I was going to say, so each time just gets hard. That baggage gets heavier and heavier. Yeah,
we've looked at this, we've done studies on this, and the history just repeats itself. It's something that you bring with you into the next one.
Even with different players?
Different players, different generations, 10 years after, the stigma, the trauma is just very much alive.
Looking at the squads in the Euros this year, is there one country in particular that stands out to you? Think, right, if they go to penalty shootout, they're going to win it, looking at those players in that team? You can say England if you want.
Yeah.
We got Ivan Toney.
Well, let's talk England, because, I mean, England has, I think, a super exciting team and an outstanding lineup of players. So you can easily find 5 to 6 players who, on paper, would be fantastic penalty takers. But then you have to prepare for that as well. I mean, typically now you speak about who's going to be the starting 11 in a game and in the Euros, but the real question is who's going to be the end 11.
Yeah.
Who do you end with? Because those are the ones who go into penalties, and those are the ones you need to plan.
Yeah, well, that's why what we need to do is get towards penalties. You keep Kane on, you bring Tony on just for penalties, so you've got 2 up front. Hopefully Saka's still on the pitch.
Hopefully Southgate's listening.
Palmer gets brought on as well, and Bellingham. That sounds like a pretty good 5 penalty takers.
I mean, that's the obvious choice, right? Yeah. But then, of course, the manager will know how do they feel on the day, how have they been leading up to this.
They decide in the moment more often than not. Actually, how are you feeling? Are you prepared to take it rather than ahead of the game?
Exactly, and what they need to do is to start to plan that now. Like, if these are the penalty takers I want in that game, then give them some playing time in the tournament, start to prepare them now, and of course make the proper decisions in that game with respect to substitutions.
Fascinating.
You've worked before, haven't you, with Germany, with the Netherlands, with England. Would you say that those countries approach taking penalties differently, and if so, how?
Well, I mean, I worked with the Netherlands 20 years ago, so I'm not sure if that carries over to now. But I think, in general, that teams who approach this topic carefully, meticulously, they prepare for it, they start early, they will have an advantage going into this. And those countries at least in the past, have done that quite well.
Just finally, you said you've interviewed some top players. What's the best bit of insight, would you say, you've been given when you were writing this book?
Training. That's what they say. Why am I good at penalties? I train every day.
It's not
That's
by
it.
chance.
It's not that hard when it gets to it. No.
Yeah. There's no geniuses at
No,
penalties.
you make your own luck, don't you? Well, looks fascinating.
Exactly.
I might take this home with me today, I think.
If you're into penalties, make sure you go and get this Pressure, Lessons from the Psychology of the Penalty Shootout by Geir Jordet, and hopefully England are reading it too. Have you sent them some copies?
Yeah.
No
Send them out
comment.
to Germany.
No comment.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
really
you.
fascinating
Thank you very
speaking
much.
to you. Thank
Cheers,
you,
Geir.
Geir.
Really good that.